Okay, now we're starting our Q&A section and the panel sections. And we're very glad today to listen to the people's expertise from industry, talk about the new application of AI and Fintech. We learn a lot from the two people, from industry, talk about supply chain finance, talk about big, large LLM, large big numbers in terms of applications. So we also have 4 excellent, academic presentations. So I will highly encourage people to start asking questions. And at 5:20, 30 minutes from now, Professor Ben Holmstrom is going to join us and give his final remarks. So why not we'll start with one line of questions from here.
Okay. So I'm an empiricist, so I'll probably ask questions for the 2 empirical papers. I find it very interesting. So actually for Wei's paper, I was wondering, because you mentioned that actually the big tech lenders or big tech borrowers are charged a higher interest rate despite a lower or delinquency risk or something. And the result of the similar credit risk arises mostly from people with a prior track record, right? So I wonder, how about the interest rate differentiation among the big tech borrowers? How does the interest rate differ given their prior payment history? So suppose that they already have a prior successful payment history. Are they also charged a lower interest rate? Because I wonder, how is the sort of the big tech loans priced? Is it priced properly or is it priced inappropriately? That's the first question. I guess that maybe.
Should I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Please, go
all
ahead.
right. Yeah, this is a very, very good question. I didn't get time to go over very carefully. We did look into this, right? Basically, your question is what's the price sensitivity to their credit quality, right? So there is some sensitivity, meaning that a better quality borrower or borrower with lower credit risk benefit from lower interest rate. But that variation is not huge, right? Because on average, interest rate is about 15%. So in that sense, sort of those with lower, they enjoy a little bit lower, but not too much lower. So that's why I mentioned at the end. I think so. This high interest rate could be put in place as a selection mechanism, right? So because they tend to be charged a higher rate. When you are charged at this higher interest rate, you want to pay back early. So when you want to pay back early, actually this reduces the interest. This reduces the risk, right? Because the loans will only be outstanding for a few weeks on average. So then risk also is lower. So in that sense, sort of the interest rate is not simply determined by credit quality of the borrower, but was at least partly put in place as a screening mechanism in that sense.
But why is the interest rate not actually sort of decreasing, given that we know
it is lower, but not
yeah, I know.
the
So
way down.
If it's not like sufficiently lower, it means that actually the lenders are still making profits or making more money. So I guess, is it because of lack of competition that they have information monopoly, or?
I think sort of yes. So I guess sort of the question here. First, these loans on average tend to be very small, right? So the average balance is about 8,000 RMB, which is not very big. And also they tend to be paid back very quickly. So in that sense, sort of the profit on each loan is not very high. It's like a few hundred RMB, right? So, but of course you can say, well, perhaps the lender still made money on the loans. Of course, I think they did make money on the loans. But should it be pushed all the way down to zero? Perhaps not zero, right? So you should expect them to make some money. And also furthermore, that's why I keep emphasizing the high interest rate also serve additional purpose as screening mechanism here. I think sort of, otherwise sort of if they're just charged as low as a regular loan, right? So then these borrowers may keep these loans for a long time. Then the risk actually may go up as well, right? So in that sense, actually, it may not be ideal for the lender. So I think sort of here there's an intricate relationship between the risk and actually the high interest rate. So in that sense, sort of a high interest rate, I think even though it's very hard to sort this out, but I think it's an integrated part of the mechanism itself.
Thank you.
Okay, so one question there.
Hello. Yeah. So since it's a dialogue between the industry practitioner and also academia, considering about the consumer protection and the data privacy and also the financial stability, I'm wondering that how might those high-tech lending model going to be evolving in response to the ongoing AI revolution, given that those companies they have large amount of consumer data in hand. This is for
Maybe from
Professor.
Fan, you want to answer something?
对我没有听得特别清，你能再
Sure, sure, no problem. Maybe this is for Professor Xiong and also Zhang Fen. Maybe combine the insights from all your presentation, like considering about the data privacy and also consumer protection and financial stability. So how might those high tech, like the lending model, gonna evolve in response to the ongoing AI revolution? Given that, so they have those company, they have a lot high technology company, they have a lot of consumer data in hand. So how they deal with that development of the AI?
Okay. So this is actually a very big question. This is a question
very-
for the whole industry and
yeah,
also
general.
for the policymakers, which had been, debating about this for several years already, right? I think sort of the landscape might be can change quickly over time, right? I think sort of it made a lot of progresses already in practice. I think Ant Group as well as other tech lenders clearly had improved the financial inclusion, right, over time. I think so. A lot of other borrowers, just in the data set I showed, I didn't get time. A lot of small borrowers in the data, right? So they were covered by this program. So in that sense, a lot of progress did make. But in terms of risk, right, I think sort of early on, clearly, so these are risky borrowers, right? Just as I quickly mentioned, first-time borrower, clearly they are riskier, right? So I think some amount of risk is to be expected. But I think for a regulator's point of view, the most worrying part is the systemic risk versus just any risk, right? So I think sort of in some environment, I think some risk-taking should be welcome rather than just immediately shut it off. I think sort of the regulator had been open-minded about this. So I think sort of it's useful to keep, observe as you go, right? I think that's very important for this. I think we would expect the AI to offer more and more services over time, and of course to cover new business lines. Based on different contexts, based on data coming from different sources, right? So there are more and more data I would imagine to be discovered or to be collected in different AI applications. And some of those data may be very helpful in terms of offering financial services, in terms of providing credit coverage. I think sort of it's useful to keep an, to be, I think sort of one can afford the risk. I think sort of as long as sort of those risks is not fully correlated with risk incurrent in the traditional financial system, right? I think sort of that's actually fine. I don't know whether maybe it's Zixia.
对我觉得其实这里边用户的这个数据并不一定能够直接带来帮助。就我从我的经验来看，因为用户的数据都是每个人个人的信息，这些个人的信息并不一定训进模型，对模型有正向的帮助，但是它依然是有用的。这两个方面，一方面是说我们作为模型的训练者，我们会在里边得到一些洞察。然后得到一些人可能会需要什么样的功能、什么样的知识，并且把它转化为一些知识，然后从而训进模型，它是有效的。 那另外一种是说，当我们为每一个人针对性做处理的时候，它可能没有训进模型，但是呢，它可以作为一些 prompt， 作为一些外部的信息来告知他我这个人的特性，从而能让我们得到更加精准和有效的数据。我觉得这个方面上是有一定帮助。另外一个点就是今天其实大家也开始重视这个隐私的问题，或者觉得这些数据是不是都可以交给模型。那我们现在看到一个比较大的变化在于说，我们会越来越多的有这种云模型跟端模型结合在一起的场景，就是它会让用户来选择我哪些数据是不能上传到云的，哪些数据是可以上传到云的。所以我目前看到大家就是一方面有用，另外一方面并不能直接使用。第三来讲，其实也越来越多的更规范的来应用私人的数据，来保障安全和隐私。
Zixia, you have something to say? Yeah.
Let me add a couple points here. Like first, I think first of all, the big tech companies, because they have a comparative advantage in data, algorithm, and talents. Of course, they have a better evolution in terms of the algorithm, and in the future, they probably going to come up with more accurate models and better interpretation of the model as better served for more customers. But I think that is the other area which the big company really needs to think about is because the user case scenario in big companies, they're not like universal. Although, like the example that the SVP of Ant Financial, Huang Hao, he showed an example like in insurance, pretty clear, right? Their new models is not only able to answer the question in general, they're more able to answer the question more clearly to the question itself. Like they can differentiate between like before and after, how the insurance is gonna pay back. But just think about it, this insurance is part of the business of Ant Financial. Then what about the feed industry? What about the agricultural industry? So they don't have this coverage. So you can't like rely on the big company to cover all industry. There's like multiple industry all over the places. So in the end, the AI model has to develop based on like a different knowledge bases. So in agriculture, you need to have an agriculture expert to provide insights into how to do the risk management based on the supply chain, finance, or different transactions and different distributors. Those kind of knowledge is absent in big company. So that's the area I think in the future, in order to cover more areas or in order for the AI model to be more powerful, so it has to be like the combination of both the big company and also all the players in all kinds of industries.
So maybe actually I want to add a bit to you. I think your question may be sort of related to sort of when this AI initially offer financial service initially small, right? So they are not going to affect the market dynamics, but as these services become bigger and bigger and more prevalent, I think additional issue like Hui's model trying to argue, well, at that time when the business is getting big, right? Some players may want to manipulate the data, or Liyan's model. Some players maybe want to be strategic, knowing that a lot of services are based on AIs. So then I think this will lead to the market to change, right? The nature of risk perhaps may change once these businesses become dominant, or at least sort of be a big part of the market. So I think then by that time, I think a regulator perhaps should worry more. So because of the nature of risk might be different.
I'm going to reveal my ignorance, and I want to ask a question. We hear a lot of really wonderful things using AI, machine learning, to track down a lot of things. At this moment, I'm thinking about there's a lot of risk residing in big borrowers, the companies. So are financial institutions using the model, using the capability you described, to monitor their borrowers? I think they can make a more precise estimate to really practice preventive medicine in dealing with these potential problems. Number two, I wonder if the regulators are applying the models you talk about, the capability you talk about, to monitor the financial institutions, their risk, their exposure. I mean, the operation risk, I worry about. Financial institutions' credit risk, I worry about how they manage their balance sheet and all this thing. The third thing I worry a lot about is contagion. I mean, this is another big hole that we all worry about. It seems that we can also use the machine learning and so on and so forth to deal with all this. And my feeling is that if we do not plug these holes before they become too big, we may face, I dare say, no, maybe I shouldn't say, but I worry about, very significant financial market problem, maybe even collapse, if we don't plug these holes. These holes are big. And it seems that we can use the capability to track all three of them and to practice preventive medicine.
So I just want to follow up on what Bernie just said. I think there's a distinction to be drawn here, which is part of the problem is affecting the bottom line of private companies. So, if it's affecting profitability, I think private institutions have all the incentive to try to correct themselves. But there's these externalities that the potential is generating, for example, systemic risks. That are the part of the domain that is kind of lacking attention and lacking research efforts. And for that reason, I think
Exactly.
the researchers in public institutions as well as the regulators need to step in.
I say that I have to plead my ignorance because I suspect that the regulators and the banks, they have the capability and they can hire the capability if they want to. So they may be doing that already. So let me not cry wolf. I just want to plead that there's some potential, it can be done, and it needs to be done, and I hope it's being done.
Okay, it's a question from Professor Fang.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Sheng and Zhang, right, who are the practitioners of AI in the real world. So I know all the AI models will be trained using some training data sets. And the training data sets presumably are coming from human decision makers under some regulatory environment, some policy environments. But the model you train presumably will be applied to settings where a new regulatory environment or new situation, a new policy is being imposed. In practice, how do you, kind of modify the AI models that you train using data generated in a previous regulatory regime for genuinely novel situations? I wonder whether you can provide insights on how you deal with that in reality.
Good question. First of all, the data that the AI model is generated from is not only built up based on the previous human judgment, it's also built on the fact, especially for the risk models. Usually we set up the target as like a default versus non-default. So default is a fact. So you lend somebody some money for some time period, but after 3 months or 6 months, he didn't pay back. So that's a fact. That won't be affected by the human decision. Of course, it's going to be affected by the economic, broader macroeconomic environment, of course, but that's something we call it like an exogenous fact. So the model trained out of those kind of exogenous data, I believe, is very objective, so it's less going to be affected by the human decision. But you're right, in a lot of situations, especially in the like a supply chain finance or some niche area, there's not a lot of like big data can include all, or you cannot base all your model based on just the factual data. You have to rely on a small data, a niche part of the small data. So in that sense, you have to incorporate a lot of human judgment. So in that way, it will be affected by the one that you're talking about. That's something that really we want to have like a predictive type of a view to take control of that. So that's how we like every time when we build a model, we have to consider what's the broader economy or broader regulatory change is going to be in the next 6 months or even in a year. Like today, we are talking about the financial revolution probably is going to happen in the next couple of months. That's something we already take into account. I think that's a very good point. That's why really the AI model, if you have that capability to absorb those kind of information, or that's the future AI model that we're going to build on. Yeah.
对，就其实现在的这个模型，大模型跟以往的 AI 的任务是不一样的。就以往的 AI 任务，我们一定是有一个监督式的数据，就是我有一个什么结果，有什么一个答案。其实我理解就是您说的，就是它有一定的观点在里面，会有一定的决策在里面。其实今天的大模型之所以跟以往不一样，就是它的泛化和通用，它会把它学习的数据都是非监督的。就是没有被标注的，所以也更像是一些事实或者是一些更广泛的数据，但是用极大的规模，它会把它打碎了，然后去变成一个底层能力来学习起来，所以它跟以往不一样。这个是从原理上来讲，所以它会有一些我们原来的方法叫做 zero shot 或者 few shot， 你就可以直接给它提问题。所谓的 zero shot 是说你直接提问题。它能够从以往的数据里边来迁移一个没有直接关系的方式。你比如说，原来我们如果要标注要有一个识别发票的，我们可能需要标注5万张图片。那今天不用，人就不用，你给我马上就会了。如果我不会，你给我一个案例，这就是所谓的 few shot， 我学一下就会了，激活了我这个部分。我觉得这个是一个。另外里边还有一个原则，就是我们在应用模型的时候其实是分层的。我们并不希望我们并不能把它当成一个数据库，其实它更多的学习的是一些底层能力，而它的上层，比如说或者说我们把基座模型，我们可理解为是一个刚刚毕业的刚刚上大学的本科生，他有常识，然后会写字，会识字，会算数，但是他没有专业知识，这是一个通用的，他有逻辑推理能力。而我们到了本科学习的时候呢，可能今天我们要让他当个律师，那我们就得做微调了。我可能要给他训一些律师的材料，包括告诉他律师的文书是什么样的格式，这就所谓的 alignment， 要跟人类去做对齐我们就会通过这样的方式一个一个去对齐。而对齐，如果他已经是法律毕业了，这个时候我们真的去解读一个合同的时候，这个时候我可能还要把合同给他，还要把今天的法律法规给他，他可能还要查案例库。这些东西都不包含在模型里面，而是通过它调用的时候来提供给我。所以其实有一部分经常会多变的数据是放在模型体外的，但它依然可以应用，所以它不会把那个固化，更多的是一个底层能力。
Okay, one question is back.
Thank you, Yi, for bringing together such a terrific lineup of panelists. I'm Yeung from Peking University, and my question is regarding the human-algorithm interaction. So we saw that in Wei and Bernie's papers, we saw that in Hui and Liyan's models, and also Dr. Sheng and Zhang are helping these firms to build up their AI capacities. So my question is, do you see like resistance from the current employees, like especially from the industries, the companies, to these AI adoption? And also, what type of jobs do you think are more resilient to this technological shock? Particularly, like, are we taking jobs away from college graduates? And if not, like, what type of jobs are we creating? Okay, thanks.
So start from Liyan.
I think in the morning, there's some discussion about this, and talk about some routine job for white-collar people, so they will lose their job very soon. And for some people, something you need more kind of judgment, decision making. I didn't remember that the word is called hallucination, something, illusion or something. And you need more kind of judgment. I think probably it's more difficult for a machine to replace. I don't know the experience in industry about this, but I think about ourselves as the professors. So maybe I think our job is still safe. We are more creative. We still think about structured things, think about the model theory, and observe a lot of things. Try to make a kind of theory structure to like what we just did. Think about what human and machine. And I think so. I don't think the human the machine can write a model can solve the model proposed by Hui. Think about data manipulation, and also my model probably it's very difficult for them to think about the interactions. So that's my interpretation from academia. I don't know what maybe the industry people or you can be in charge. Yeah.
Having been in the service position in running a business school, I think that what we emphasize is to train students to work alongside machines. As we have heard the whole day, it's not about fully reliance on the machine, it's about human and machine interaction. So we have to, nowadays we teach students, like everyone is a PhD student, we teach them how to ask questions and so we encourage students to use ChatGPT. It's okay, but you moderate and you continue to ask questions. So we train them on interactive development with the machine. Then the question is, what are the basics? Liyan already said it. You need to have the theoretical literacy. The second thing is you need to understand people. These are the two things you really need to have. Theoretical literacy and human literacy. Then you work with the machine. These are the kind of things we do since I was in NUS and so on and so forth. Then there's one more thing that's very important. Not all generations are user-friendly to the new phenomenon. So the question is how you can help the 40, 50, 60-year-old to conduct continuous lifelong learning. That is a very challenging exercise. Some cannot be done, and some have to. In Singapore, we were talking about this since 2010 and try to make this happen. What I worry about is that in some locations, they don't talk about this, they don't talk about continuous learning, and they do not train the students to be lifelong learners. Then at the end, when they find that the jobs are gone, they will activate the protectionism. Then one more thing is that when we think about all this AI, there's definitely machine and labor substitution. At the same time, there's definitely creation of new jobs because of the innovation. So taxi drivers are now not taxi drivers. You can use an AI, but taxi drivers are tourist guides. When you come to Singapore, you find out that the taxi driver is telling you, this house is haunted, this house is wonderful, this place is the best place to get Hainan chicken rice. So, I mean, everything changed. It's about how we try to move the society together with the technology's progress.
Any comments, feedback?
I want to hear the rest of the panel, so I'll just be very brief. I think I totally agree that being adaptive is the key. It applies to everybody, including the young students as well as older folks like us.
Yeah, sure. I actually happen to be academic dean at the Chinese University of Hong Kong's new campus in Shenzhen, right? So in last few weeks actually has been very stressful because it's the college admission time, right? So the School of Management Economics, we had a lot of pressure because all the the Gaokao students are really, so now showed a lot of hesitation to go to business school, right? Because with the AI they thought they should major in AI or something, major in computer science, data science, and so on. But I thought actually this morning's discussion made it clear, right? Actually, AI reduced the technical barrier in many technical fields, right? Now it's very easy to do programming, right? Because, in the old days, we have spent many hours to do a, fortune code. I mean, I used to write the fortune code. It was very difficult. You need a lot of training for it. Now, write the code is very simple. ChatGPT can do it for you, right? So I think sort of, we really need to fully understand the impact of this. Actually, I think the change actually implies we need more business people who understand applications, who can be more creative in using AI to create more business applications, right? Make it more easily available because you don't really need that many, technical people, right? Because barrier is actually lower.
我觉得与其说是替代人类或替代工作，我觉得不如说是改变、产生新的工作。因为其实你看，像 发明蒸汽机的时候，大家发明汽车的时候，可能会觉得说马车夫都是不是没有工作了？但是其实你看，今天我们开汽车的可能远远多过原来骑马的，所以我觉得这个其实不用担心不会替换，但是会让我们的工作方式发生变化。就是我们看来，其实今天某种程度上会更加的激发每个人的创造力。因为我们前2天有一个发布会，有一个小朋友只有9岁的时间，他借助 AI 写了一个故事书，然后是带插图的。但是如果在没有 AI 的情况下，他可能有一个很好的 idea， 但是他并没有办法把它变成一个结果。他需要一定会画画，一定会写作，就极大的抑制了我们的这些想象力的发挥。所以他仅仅是9岁就能做得很好。另外呢，就是我觉得 AI 会让我们产生很多超级个体。就是会让一个人能够做原来一个团队能做的事儿。就是你原来你可能是个工程师，你就不会写产品需求，不会画图。今天可以有 AI 帮你做出一个虚拟的团队来帮你完成，而这个没有一个真正团队之间的这种连接的带宽的损耗，而是在你自己的内部全部都把它搞定。我觉得它会极大的激发人类的创造力。而且对每个人来讲是公平的，它是个普惠的，它不是仅限于你受过某种教育，会有某种技能你才可以做。所以我觉得会极大的激发我们的工作方式，有可能未来我们所有的工作方式跟今天都会变得完全不一样，组织形式完全不一样。像Sam Altman也讲到说，很快可能会有，现在有几个人、10几个人10亿美金的公司，他认为很快会有1个人10亿美金的公司出现。我觉得可能是这样的一个变化吧。
Any more questions? Yes, one question there.
Thanks for the great speeches. I have learned a lot. I have one question for Professor Chen. So, in your model, I think, for example, if the green asset, may enter the true preference, right? Or if the mandate, then it enters in the constraint. But from the perspective of reviewed preference, the green asset enter into the constraint will still go to the optimal allocation finally when you see that. So when you see the review preference point of view, then this may be seen as an induced preference. So in practice, I just wonder why we care about what you are talking about, why we care about this is really going to the real preference or constraints. I don't know whether I understand you correctly or not.
No, that's a great question. I think this basically speaks to the micro foundation for this mandate model. We kind of view this, of course, as a reduced form to capture something about the contracting frictions, right? You would like to think that if these people who have the money, who want to invest in truly green assets, if they can, they will be able to write a better contract with these professional money managers so that they can induce them to truly invest in green assets rather than investing in assets that have nominally high green scores. But that kind of contract frictions, of course, is abstracted away from our model. So as a result, we show them as a constraint as imposed. But you're absolutely right that you're pointing to the fact that the one solution or a more interesting kind of follow-up paper to think about is how can we solve this problem by essentially writing better contracts to incentivize the money managers to not just blindly follow the scores. Yeah.
Okay, since we turn to the end of today's panel discussions, as a chair, I use my last privilege to ask one question to all the audience, all the panel speakers. So this morning, overall, we know the advanced application for AI and the machine learning, big data, and also a very nice paper talk about how to use machine learning, big data, lending models, as well as how to use technology to reshape loan contract term, contract enforcement, as well as 2 very interesting papers try to talk about potential risk in terms of manipulation, the boundary between AI and machine, and humans. My question will relate back to one keyword, information. Because Professor Ben Homstern talked a lot about the giant scholar of information. My question in terms of information first is incomplete. Use AI, with machine learning, we can learn a lot. And secondly, we have a black, white, and gray area of machine learning models. Too complicated. My first question is how to deal with people like us. We have no knowledge, advanced knowledge for AI. How to deal with information incentive to verify those complicated models? How to to verify also result ChatGPT teach me. So my first question, how to deal with the incentive as a free rider to deal with the comprehensive large language model, etc. Is kind of AI tools. That's the first question, free riders and the verification incentive. Secondly, in disclosure literature, we all know we can strategically disclosures. We can provide some limited information to manipulate, to induce a lot of investor to another, all kinds of decision. So I want to hear all the speakers, the panel speaker. Question number one, free riding. Secondly, about the strategic manipulation of data, or informations, disclosures. Start from Liyan.
So when you talk about the free riding, you talk about free riding by...
Us, like people we don't know the models are complicated.
You mean in academia or in industry?
On average, normal people.
Normal people. Yeah, I think that's more like inclusive finance, right? Inclusive finance. I think that's always an issue, right? So if you don't understand something and some new technology coming up, and then that's beneficial for people and for the general people, and you have to give them a kind of incentive, give the AI people, and it's why I think the why is now. So it's those improvement like OpenAI or this kind of thing. They have the kind of debate over their governance and to think about this whether non-profit or profit or this kind of issue. And also I think even in general you think about the medicine industry. The medicine is also you develop the medicine, right? So like the movie 不是药神, right? This is similar. So you have to put a lot of money to make this kind of investment. Always the economic question. I think this free riding problem not specific to AI. It's probably so any technology has that problem, and you have to give them an incentive. And probably later on similar problem. Now is why the big firms they provide this. The second question is about strategic disclosure, and I think that Hui has probably more to say about that strategic disclosure, the manipulation, the part, and how to think about it. This is a recent example of that we just mentioned the Chinese CEO, the certificate issue. So I probably leave this for Hui and Bernie.
Yeah. Big questions to answer. I am not good enough to answer these questions, but let me try to pitch my thinking. I deeply believe in what Hayek said about the society as an information processor. And so therefore, like in the second paper I present, I was basically saying that let us display all the information that is available to anyone with a phone, then let them see. In other words, we distribute information as much as we can, allow democracy, but anyone who can extract information and turn it into knowledge can profit from it. And that is essentially Hayek's model. And I would recommend that you can free ride by all means, but as long as there are people who can turn the information into knowledge and make good resource allocation, that's perfect. Then the second thing about strategic, and we hear a lot of things about how we can nullify the strategic behavior, but at the end of the day, it's impossible to do all of this. And I beg everyone to read the book by Adam Smith, The Theory of Moral Sentiment. Everyone has an inner man in us, and it's that inner man who is this neutral spectator to judge our behavior, and we cannot run away from the judgment. And I think at the end of the day, we really need to talk about that too.
Wait.
I think this free riding problem is an interesting one. Reminds me of this debate in the AI community. I think Zhang 总可能更多发言权. So in the US, for example, there's this huge debate about whether you should develop these large language models using open source versus privately owned. And clearly there are very strong disagreement about which one is the better solution for the entire society. There's a lot of debates about that, so I'm sure you can hear more from you. The second question about the strategic disclosure, yeah, this is an old problem. This is nothing new in economics. In fact, I'm more optimistic about with all this AI and technology, because we can bring data from many different sources. it becomes actually more possible to detect manipulation. So in a way, maybe speaking against my paper in the sense that the fact that there is a technology that is so powerful in bringing data in different ways, you can find it easy to check for inconsistency, and maybe that can be used as a tool against or fighting against this kind of manipulation. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think my feeling is similar to Hui. So it depends, but there's a crucial issue is about whether data are shared, right? The whole point about the AI is that it requires a lot of data. And a lot of these data might be proprietary. So if data are not shared, then actually it's not clear that there's a free riding problem, because the services are often, the whole point is they're individual specific, right, personalized. So it's very hard for others to ride on it unless data are shared. And also to the extent that multi-dimension data are going to be used, right? So it's hard to be strategic because you cannot strategically disclose one dimension. You can easily do that for one dimension, but it's hard to fake all dimensions, right? So, but there's a tricky issue we didn't get into is about data sharing, right? So I think open banking opened the door for a lot of data to be shared across different institutions. So if data are going to be shared, then yeah, that will lead to free rider problem, I think, right? But this is a tricky. That's related to a lot of intricate issue we talked about earlier about the privacy and other things. Perhaps it's too short to get into that. But that's my feeling. Yeah.
我看时间也超了，所以我就简单来说，我觉得其实对于 AI 不用太多的担心，每个人每个公司都应该把它开始融入到自己的学习生活当中。我觉得这个我们现在沿着这个方向已经回不去了，就每个人都应该拥抱起来，后面还会发展得更快。
I always have a very strong personal belief, like AI is in the future is going to going towards an interaction between the human being and the algorithm itself. And from the algorithm itself, it's going to be more efficient, more accurate, more like as good as a human being, like the facial recognition thing like before, it can even recognize, but now it's doing pretty good job in doing that. But on the other hand, how to incorporate the human knowledge into the models to make it better, and also how to do it interactively. Not like now I think even for the best AI model, it still need quite a lot of training, and you have to put in a lot of human knowledge beforehand. It's not doing an interactive way. So I believe in the future, if you can do a good job and interactively, then the information can be different, can be actually separated. Like the first part, of the general part, the general algorithm part, it can be free ride. That's okay, it can be free ride, it can be used by everyone. But on the other hand, you always create those proprietary knowledge and the chance, the opportunity for knowledgeable people to incorporate your knowledge into your proprietary learning algorithm to make it better and make it more fitted to your user case scenario. I think that's the future that AI is going to go.